Palantir, a data collection company currently sitting at number 5 on the billion-dollar startup club, was recently hit with a lawsuit by the Department of Labor for discrimination. Discrimination against who? Well, to the surprise of anyone familiar with the tech industry, Palantir is supposedly discriminating against Asians. As USA Today reported, in one example cited by the lawsuit, Palantir reviewed more than 130 qualified applicants for an engineering intern position, 73% of whom were Asian. The company hired 17 non-Asian applicants and 4 Asians. This came as a shock to me and many others considering how well represented Asians are within tech. Even at a hyper-progressive company like Twitter, Asians hold 34% of technical positions. And remember, we're talking about Asians, the minority that doesn't really count as a minority because, well, they're successful. Economist Walter E. Williams summed it up perfectly. A minority group is not a minority if, as a group, it is successful. Asian median family income is $55,525, the highest of any other racial group in America. More than 44% of Asians aged 25 and over have bachelor's degrees. The rate for all other Americans was 26%. Other indicators of group success would include low crime rate and high family stability. Case closed, Asians are not a minority. Or maybe Palantir is going the way of Princeton University admissions by openly setting a higher bar for Asians. At Princeton, a bonus was added to an applicant's SAT score, which was based entirely on their race. If you're African American, 230 bonus points for you. Hispanic, 185. Asian Americans, negative 50. To be perfectly clear here, it is actually harder for Asians to get into Princeton simply because they're Asian. Honestly, I can't help but wonder if an Asian math professor did the statistics to come up with those racial bonus points. So when there's no shortage of Asians in tech, even without the excuse of white privilege, and when they actually have to score higher on the SAT to get into college, it's no surprise that many, including me, begin to speculate whether this move has political motives. Palantir's founder, Peter Thiel, is outspoken towards libertarian and conservative causes. He contributed to the McCain-Palin ticket in 2008, the Romney-Ryan ticket in 2012, and became one of the pledged California delegates for Donald Trump at this year's Republican National Convention, where he declared himself proud to be gay and proud to be Republican. By Silicon Valley standards, where in 2012, 83% of employee donations from top tech companies went to President Obama, Thiel is basically Hitler behind only Trump himself. But conspiracy theory aside, I'm continually amazed at the desire for government intervention to fix instances of discrimination in private affairs. Just last week, The Daily Show dedicated an entire segment to the discrimination laws in North Carolina.
But bathrooms are just the tip of the iceberg. The HB2 law also allows businesses in North Carolina to discriminate based simply on who they believe might be gay, which is insane.
And exactly why is it insane? Well, he never elaborates on that.
So I rented a food truck, made up a fake barbecue company, and set out to refuse service to people by telling them they're gay. Now let's be clear, I don't care if they're gay or not, but HB2 says I can do this Jim Crow level and nobody can stop me.
Jim Crow level bullshit. It's as if nobody actually looked at what this means. Jim Crow laws were state and local laws enforcing segregation. This was the government stating that as long as the facilities were equal, state and local governments could require public schools, public transportation, federal workplaces, and the military could be segregated. When a government guarantees equal protection under the law for all of its citizens, this discrimination violated one of their own constitutional amendments and it was rightly overturned. Jim Crow laws, or public discrimination, is much different from private forms of discrimination like the now famous case of sweet cakes, which refused to make a cake for a lesbian couple's wedding, simply because they were Christian. Many believe the customer was the victim of discrimination and thought government intervention was the answer to prevent round 2 of Jim Crow. Discrimination of this type should be perfectly acceptable if we want to live in a free society. Discrimination happens around us all the time, but it's only when the right minority's feelings are hurt that we think something needs to be done. Curve's Gym discriminates against men, but we call this marketing. Certain restaurants have dress codes. You could call this income discrimination. Movie theaters do it as well, but as a benefit. Senior citizens and students get a discount. Whole Foods discriminates against people who live on a diet of Snickers, pizza rolls, and Mountain Dew. Is Whole Foods a subtle form of fat shaming and income discrimination? I've been to Macy's where 4 floors are dedicated to women's clothing with only one for men. Discrimination is all around us. Now let's assume for a second that Palantir did have a discrimination policy against Asians. Would I agree with it? No. But do I think the government should do something about it? Absolutely not. With this specific form of discrimination, I'm not receiving any benefit like I would be as a student at a movie theater. It is outright discrimination against me being half Asian for the simple fact that I'm half Asian. But how does it qualify as progress in any way? The government has to step in and say, Palantir, you must hire Asians even though you obviously don't want to. I would much rather live in a society where Palantir's discriminatory behavior against Asians is allowed and out in the open. I'd rather know a company like Palantir exists than to have the government force them to play nice and hire me against their will. Whether it's a bakery that doesn't want to serve gay couples or a coffee shop that doesn't want to do business with a certain race, I'd much rather have the transparency of racists and sexists in society out in the open than for the government to intervene and force everyone to play nicely. I'm really surprised this belief isn't more common. Unfortunately, this desire to eliminate discrimination from society, so often chalked up to a need to increase empathy for people from different walks of life, often feels like it only applies in one direction. When a Christian baker doesn't want to bake a cake for a gay couple, something must be done to right this discrimination. But the NBA has the complete freedom to discriminate against a state and all the potential economic beneficiaries by pulling its All-Star game from a state due to a political disagreement. Bruce Springsteen has complete freedom to discriminate and cancel a show in North Carolina for similar reasons. PayPal has complete freedom to cancel plans to open an office in Charlotte. Where is the empathy for the people within the state who may not even agree with their state government? Discrimination is apparently wrong, but discrimination against discrimination seems to be perfectly okay. Within tech, this outright discrimination against anyone with right-leaning views could not be any more obvious. Brendan Eich, former CEO of Mozilla, was forced to resign over a donation of $1,000 to California's Proposition 8. Palmer Luckey donated $10,000 to Nimble America to make racist and sexist attacks against Hillary Clinton like too big to jail. Since the story was released, he hasn't posted on Twitter, and it looks like his involvement with Oculus Rift and Facebook may be over. Douglas Crockford, a prominent developer within the JavaScript community, was removed as a keynote speaker at the tech conference in November for being sexist. What was this sexist statement? Instead, we're adding a second kind of object, which unfortunately is known as weak map. And that's a problem because nobody wants to put anything weak in their program, right? Unfortunately, this isn't a joke. But when Facebook co-founder Dustin Moskovitz donates $35 million to Democrats, it's not a mixing of politics in the workplace because, it's for Hillary. In order for a free society to exist, we must be willing and able to tolerate freedom of association, even if we may sometimes find it offensive. Trying to decide exactly what type of discrimination goes too far, if it's even considered discrimination in the first place, is entirely too subjective, and getting the government involved doesn't solve any problems. We as individuals discriminate every day in a variety of different ways. I discriminate against businesses who don't provide the level of customer service I want. I discriminate against businesses who provide inferior goods and services. I discriminate against potential partners because they're annoying or physically unattractive. I discriminate against who I provide my technical labor to for a variety of different reasons, and you do too. Nothing magical happens when a group of people get together, call themselves a business, and start selling a product. Let's stop pretending it does and move towards freedom by giving everyone the right to discriminate.